Hello, everyone. Welcome to another forecast. This is Dr. Claire Moon of Aligning Light Astrology, and we're going to be talking about what month is it? It's August. We're going to be talking about August. So if you are joining me, thank you so much. If you're joining me live, if you're joining me later, that's cool. If you have comments, you can put them below. I try to keep up with them. If you can see the chat to the side of your screen, feel free to ask me questions in there today. I'll probably be here for about an hour and a half, and we'll be talking just about the next 2 weeks coming up from August 1st to around mid-August. And then I'll be back to do the rest of the month later. Before we do get into all of the details, I do have some orders of business. So bear with me if you want to go get a snack. Now is probably the time. Let me just see. Oh, hello, Kai. Welcome back. I guess, maybe we can just do the dates of interest right off of the bat, just to get them out there. So, what? Where are my notey notes? So this month, August 2024, on the 4th, we've got Venus entering into Virgo. We also have Mercury stationing retrograde that same day. So like the 4th and 5th of August there's a few things going on. We have a new moon on the 4th. So very, very reset tones on the first week of August. And then on the 14th, Mercury is going to move back into Leo. On the 18th, and now this is what we'll talk about a little later, but we are going to get a little bit into this Mercury stuff. Mercury conjunct the Sun, Cazimi, on the 18th of August. We have an Aquarius full moon on the 19th. We're going to enter Virgo season with the Sun on the 22nd, and then Mercury stationing direct on the 28th. And then finally, we get Venus entering into Libra at the end of the month on the 29th. And then visibility-wise this month, we should be getting Mercury showing back up, or sorry, Mercury disappearing in the evening sky. So Mercury's gonna go away eventually behind the beams of the sun. Venus should be visible. So if you're out there in the evening after the sun has set, you should be able to see Venus. Yeah. So those are kind of visibility things I was noticing for this month. And then, okay, so not astrology. But before we get into astrology, I actually want to talk about just some fun things that I've been finding lately. So I've been taking some lectures here and there, and anytime I take a really good lecture, like I just want people to know about it so that you can also learn what I am learning. And I have been trying to get through this chart calculations course currently. Demetra George has a really great course for calculating charts by hand, and I'm not done with that. And I've actually taken a bit of a bit of a side quest in understanding better the great circles that make up like the meridian and the equator and the ecliptic, all the big circles that we trace around the earth to help us make all of our fancy astrology calculations. I've been learning that from Cameron Cassidy. So their astrology, it's called Omega Astrology. And they've got all of their classes up there, but they've got one on the great circles. And then they also have one on the ancient Egyptian astrology that really led to the house system that we have now in Western astrology. What we mostly consider Western astrology actually originated in like North Africa, Southwest Asia. And the Egyptians had a lot to do with that history. And so Cameron Cassidy's been talking a lot about that. But then also, I took a course from, or not a course, a class. J.M. Hamade is also looking at the ancient Egyptian astrology, particularly around like the origin of the houses. So I just want to put that in the chat. I'm going to remind myself to put it below in my show notes. But it's from Star Night Dwell. That's J.M. Hamade, and that was just such a great lecture. So just want to throw that out there. Not necessarily friends of the show. I don't think they know that I'm shouting them out, so hopefully they're okay with that. And then, of course, I want to say give the gift of communication. We do have Jupiter and Gemini right now. And one thing that I've been kind of focusing on in terms of my efforts to try to help the world, especially with some of the conflicts going on currently with Gaza in particular, right now, as part of the discussion, trying to get out of there is very difficult because there's no internet, and organizing healthcare, anything, you need the internet. And so we have the technology to help people get internet who don't have infrastructure for that. So I'm going to put that in the chat as well. And I believe that is below. Is it below? No, it's not. I'll have to add that too. But that's another thing. No pressure at all. But check it out. Tell your friends. There's ways you can buy eSIM cards for people and give it to them. So check that out. And then last order of business. And this is kind of actually a bit of a philosophical aside. So again, one last thing. And if you've been following me, this is also a time for you to go get snacks because you probably heard me talk about this at length before. But yeah, maybe this is a good segue into, okay, half philosophical discussion, half reflection on the last 2 weeks, because the last time we talked, I haven't been here since all of the hullabaloo that happened in America with the attempt on Trump. So I haven't been here since then. This is the first time I've been back. And so I do want to reflect on that because we had been looking at some big weather coming up. It ended up being a pretty big patch of weather, and a lot of big things did happen, as we saw. All the presidential stuff in the United States was all going on. And that's where I am. So that's kind of where my focus is right now, is like this dumb election that we're in. So yeah, if you're not dealing with it, I'm happy for you. But in any event, we had some big weather. We were talking about that big weather, and it came. And for those of you who really follow like astrology online, that's kind of, I think, a good way to have your finger on the pulse of how this information is landing, how the information of astrology is being utilized by people. And I just was very saddened and like it was very concerning to see us yet again respond like, I'm gonna be real, a bunch of Chicken Littles. The sky is falling, the sky is falling. We gotta stop that. So we're gonna talk about that. Because I'm like, if this is the case, if we're gonna just use astrology to be more upset and to not help us cool our stuff, then I'm probably doing harm, and I kind of don't even want to do this. Like I've really been having like a midlife crisis about forecasting, and like if I should even be forecasting, because I can't control how this stuff lands with people. And so I'm going to try to do more management up front and more often, and making more philosophical pit stops. And it's probably going to be boring, and maybe I'll lose some followers over it. It's not going to be their jam anymore. I'm not going to be, constantly focused on the technical details maybe as much if I'm spending more time on knowledge management and all of that, which I think is a necessary thing that a lot of us aren't getting. And we don't have, at least in the West, we don't have a cultural framework usually that supports astrology in our brains. Yeah. So in any event, I just like we could do better. We could do a lot better as astrologers and how we portray this information about big weather, big exciting weather. We can do a better job, and I am going to try to do a better job myself with that. So one of my philosophical asides, let's actually look at this, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Um, hmm. And thank you for the patience of everyone listening to me right now with this stuff. I know it's not everyone's jam to kind of talk about like the meta discussion, the secondary, tertiary discussions, which maybe should be the primary ones around what we're doing with astrology in the first place. We can look in the past, we can look right now, we can look in the future. So that's what we're trying to do. And it's like, how do we look at the future without it driving us insane? Or how do we look at the future and be curious about what's going to happen versus trying to pick out and just flailingly grab at any piece of information to try to give us some certainty, even though it's not correct? Like that's not what I want. I want to try to keep things open-ended and curious and give people a sense of agency with this information. Like, okay, I know what's coming. I can better prepare. But what I'm really concerned about, and I mean, takes one to know one, ask me how I know. But I see in myself, even this happening where it's like I can only see a fuzzy outline of the future, and yet I am trying to make it so certain before it happens. Like, oh, it's certainly going to be bad, or we're certainly going to be defensive, or we're certainly going to blah, 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 blah. It's not the move, in my opinion. It's not a way to use astrology in a way that is sustainable or healthy when we're getting like that. But this is what I want to talk about. Okay, now I'm getting rambly. So over the last week, we had that Mars-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. And we had the fixed signs were kind of where I was focused. And this was in July when we had Mars moving up to Uranus there. And then as that took place, we had Mars meet Uranus, and then we have to watch the moon, because the moon really is usually what I'm following when I'm giving these forecasts. And the moon, even though Mars was, by the time all of the attempts on lives were done, Mars had pretty much been moving. I don't know if they were past, but they were right there. And then the moon in Libra, I was thinking maybe I felt like it was going to be somewhat expressive. We did have some Leo planets, and I was like, well, maybe there's, maybe some tumultuousness with Mars, Uranus, Mars, Lord of action, sudden, unexpected actions with Uranus, energy, effort, action with Mars. And PS, just I'm not going to try to repeat myself too much, but last forecast I went over my thoughts about this. So we can see these archetypes, and archetypes are just a fancy word for like a grouping of themes. Themes, like there's a theme in sports, there's competition, that's a theme. In relationships, there can be romance as a theme. So each planet can have these sets of themes associated with it. And then underneath that broad set of themes, you can have all of these different outcomes happening. Like so many, I can think of a billion ways that Mars and Uranus and Taurus can come out, and then specialize that to someone's chart based on their own birth chart and special things about them. But it's still really hard for someone to look into the future and be like, all right, we got some archetypal themes. There's going to be, an attempt on someone's life, or there's going to be violence or something like that. Like it's really, I think, pretty impossible for any kind of reasonable person to try to, pluck out one of those little specific things that could happen out of that whole umbrella. We can't do that. So we got to stay open-ended about things. So we got the archetypes, we got Mars, we got Uranus. I'd shared some of those archetypes around action, effort, energy, and then interruption, sudden things, unexpected things. I had also mentioned expressiveness, and I specifically remember saying, like, if we could find ways to express ourselves without harming each other, that would be ideal, right? Because we've got a lot of, air and fire in the sky, and air and fire, they always want to be more externally influencing the world around it and acting on things and embodying things. And so that can be very expressive in a number of ways, a number of healthy ways. We unfortunately saw unhealthy ways that some expression was done. And so the moon then moving through Libra and Scorpio mid-July, there was a lot of action. And on the internet, there were people, and I actually had a day here too where I had a lot of feelings. It was like the 15th, I'm pretty sure. It was like the 15th or the 16th. It was like Mars had already moved past Uranus, and the moon in Scorpio, I was like, well, Mars is done with Uranus, right? But the moon is still kind of plugging into whatever that was, and that energy's still here. And yeah, so that was for me. My day was the 15th, and I knew I knew that was like a thing. And as soon as it started happening, I was like, oh yeah, this is it for me. This is how I'm seeing this come out. What I didn't do is make up a bunch of stories in my brain about all the gnarly things that my feelings could mean. I dealt with my feelings. I had a conversation with a friend. Like, I did the things I needed to do to hold my feelings and care for them. And that was that. It didn't have to be this big dramatic thing because, oh, I had feelings and oh, they aligned with the sky. Yeah. Yeah. And it rained and I went outside and I got wet. Yeah, that's how it works. And then I think when we go online and we sensationalize all this stuff, it just stirs up the pot. It just, yeah. So even in our own kind of, and now I'm worrying that I don't want to censor anyone. I don't want to censor myself. But we have to think this is a very Libra Aries philosophy now. It's like, yes, expression, but what is the effect on the environment around you, including the people around you? And are you just, lobbing another, you know, uh, fuel on the fire? And, it's like, am I really improving on the silence here? And so I think, with astrology becoming so big and my own personal concern about the eventual backlash, I think the less we can sensationalize and be absolutely ridiculous about astrology, the more we can avoid that, like, and not be ridiculous about it and try to be grounded. I think that's going to be actually very protective for our community, versus just being absolutely absurd online about these things. Um, and having the outside world and lawmakers look in at us and then make fortune telling laws about us, which we shouldn't be lumped into, but we are. This is very real consequences that I'm thinking about here. I'm not just, this is about like visibility. This is like an optics. It's about like actual consequences in societies. Like, there are places in the world where astrology is illegal. It could be illegal here again. And uh, I'm like, we got to do things differently. We gotta bring it down to earth a little bit. Um, so anywho, here was that. Now, as we move forward, maybe tying it into now, the next time we get a Scorpio moon, the rest of the sky is going to be a little different. Um, so by the time we get to mid-August, now Mars is no longer in the fixed signs. Venus is no longer in Leo. And I feel like Leo Venus is very warrior Venus mode and very like strong, expressive. That's what we had in July. Much more muted, or quieter, more careful, more deliberate types of Venus here in August. So very different sky in the fixed signs. So I don't expect like the next Libra and Scorpio moon to bring the same things that last month did, of course, because the rest of the sky is different. Um, but yeah, I wanted to point that out too. Okay. One last thing on the philosophical note, and then I promise we will actually do astrology. Um, I want to tell a little story that a lot of my clients have heard, and I've heard it a lot. It's a story about a person who is painting a tiger, and they're painting a tiger on the wall and doing a lot of detail, and they're, very immersed in it. And once they finally get done painting this tiger, they stand back to view the whole painting, and it startles them. They actually get startled because of the realism of that painted tiger. Um, and so similar to this, and I feel like astrology just is fuel for this. It's like astrology gives us a whole palette to paint with. And so in our minds, we look at the future and we get anticipation, anxiousness, maybe anticipation for the future. That's normal. Um, I have it every time I do one of these. I have a little bit of anxiousness before I start these. I'm anticipating the future. Our brains are made to do that. They're like designed to anticipate the future for our survival. I don't think, we would have astrology if that wasn't the case. Uh, but then how do we, hold ourselves when we are finding ourselves in that state of anticipation? And, these painted tigers. So it's like we see some future transits, we see some archetypes. Like, again, let's use the example of Mars and Uranus. Mars can be conflict, sudden separation, sudden harms, right? That we saw happen. And like, before that happened, though, we didn't know that that was going to happen. And we could make all kinds of stories in our mind about all the things that these transits could mean. Or if I'm looking at zodiacal releasing and I've got a bunch of peak periods coming up and I'm looking at the signs that they're in, I could be making all kinds of stories about what the busyness or the activity of that peak period could be. Um, But that's not real. It has not happened yet. So we can't hold too tightly to those things. And I think just having that awareness of watching and kind of noticing like, am I making a painted tiger right now? And it can be like hopes, dreams. I mean, God, like I remember having a crush once. I was making all kinds of painted tigers about that crush. OMG. It was just like, and then it almost got to be like this like intellectual mental masturbatory type of exercise where it's just like looking into the void and just for what, like just painting tigers. I mean, I guess if you want to do that, that's cool, but also know that that is not real. And we're not going to know until the future happens. Um, but yeah, there's the painted tiger thing. So let's all just be watching for that. Uh, yeah, I think that was kind of the main thing. So I feel like there was something else I wanted to say too, but it left me. Yeah, I mean, I guess, in a nutshell too, if the whole painted tiger thing, like if that's not you, because I know some people have aphantasia where it's hard to visualize. Anytime we're like thinking about the future, thinking about an unknown, uh, we have to understand when we are making stories, do we really have evidence for that thing that we think is definitely going on, or we think it's happening, or we think that's what's the deal is? Do you really have every piece of evidence for that? Or is astrology just filling in blanks erroneously so that we can feel a sense of certainty? That and feeling certain is not the same as being correct, but our brains squirt out calming, happy chemicals when we feel certain, and we don't get those when we feel uncertain. So, that's another motivating factor why I think we kind of get into this habit of using astrology in a way that isn't helpful. Oh, and I did remember the other thing I wanted to say. Uh, that staring into the void, you know. I was listening to a mathematician talk about recently how even the study of math and geometry, it's such a beautiful science, and there's all these beautiful shapes and equations and stuff. And he said he's seen people just get lost just looking at that gem and just turning it. And it's very beautiful and there's that rapture of it. But it's like, yeah, if we're like clinging to that and we're like stuck on that, like you're stuck on a video game, um, you're not doing astrology necessarily. You're playing with astrology, which is fine. And, maybe part of this is part of our practice of like, part of us, we do have to think of all of the possibilities that we can probably imagine just as an exercise, but knowing that we have limits, right? And so there's the limits piece, there's the don't get stuck staring into the voids piece, there's the not making painted tigers piece. Um, a lot of this doesn't it doesn't it's not relevant to like natal astrology, like when you're reading your birth chart. I mean, well, maybe a lot of it is relevant still, but I'm specifically talking about forecasting astrology when we're trying to look at the future as best we can. But yeah, that's my philosophical spiel. I think I'm done with that now. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you got something out of there that was helpful. And now, last little thing, and now this is something I'm going to start doing if I'm remembering every time. This should be part of my launch sequence, is I want to start grounding more. And I have like no training to be like a yoga teacher. I have no training. Well, I was a dance instructor and I did get training for dance instruction. And this is actually where one of these kind of meditative grounding things comes from that I want to do today. But just so you know, I don't have like a ton of training in certain things, but I think I can still do like a grounding exercise with this just fine. I don't think I'm gonna cause any harm doing that. Um, One thing that one of my dance teachers did once, which was so great, their name is Brooke, and they're from Michigan. But hi, Brooke, if you're listening, I don't think you are. Uh, but before we started our dance class, what she would do is have us just all sit quietly and take a few deep breaths. And as you do work through a few, 2, 3 deep breaths in and out, take a look around the room that you're in. Look at the corners, look at the ceiling, look at the floor. You can Slowly turn your head. You can turn your body if you can, if that's comfortable. Turn your neck if that's possible or comfortable, and just see everywhere that you can see in the space that you're in. And I think when we do this, it tells our brain that we're safe. It tells our little lizard brain that there's no predators in the room. We are A-okay. And like, I love that. It's so nice, right? What is really here right now? I think a common one we use a lot too is coming into the senses. What am I tasting, touching, smelling at the moment? So, and now we're going to blast off into the stratosphere and do some astrology. So thank you so much for listening. I appreciate that so much. And now I'm going to look at the chat. Oh, there are people here. Hello, Courtney. Hello, Danielle. Hello. Hello, Zachary. Hello, Michael. Hello, Ben. Welcome. So yeah, let's look at the time ahead and let's be curious and open about it. And if I'm saying stuff, because like the thing too, I'm like, oh, there might be a few mind your own business days. So when I say mind your own business days, because I was reflecting on that and I was like, is that going to make people nervous? Are people going to think like someone's going to be like, popping out of a bush at them or something if I'm telling people to mind their own business? No, but it's like, okay, if it's raining and you don't want to get wet, don't go outside. If the astrology weather is kind of a certain way, and you want to do sympathetic magic about it or do the things that you want to do to deal with that particular piece of weather. That is more what I mean about mind your own business days. We might actually have to manage some things a little bit more versus when the wind is at your back and you're just being carried along by the cosmic winds. Sometimes, so I don't mean especially that, like the mind your own business days. I might find a different way to talk about that. Hopefully, and this is where I hope people are picking up what I'm putting down. Okay, let's go to the 1st of August. And I'm pretty sure, let's see. I'm pretty sure. There. Okay, so August 1st and 2nd and 3rd. So August really opens up with a waning moon. So this waning moon, usually the wrapping ups of things, tying up loose ends, regrouping, more resting maybe than activity. It's not always a one-to-one perfect thing, but there was kind of a general notion that the amount of light of the moon tells us how kind of busy, active, meaningful a set of days might be. So for instance, the old adage about like emergency rooms being more full during the full moon or like full moon and people are acting wild or whatever. My theory is that during a full moon, when the moon is full of light, everyone's just like doing all their stuff and being more expressive and active and like bumping into each other and like, yeah, you're probably gonna get a fender bender because there's just more people out on the road, or something like that. But it's not like that, like the full moon makes people different or like wild, or it's just like a probability thing. It's like literally if there are more people out doing stuff, yeah, like the grocery store is going to be really hectic if everyone's out doing stuff. So yeah, here's the opposite. Now we've got a new moon or a balsamic here coming into a new moon, and we're having not very much light, pretty much invisible at this point in August. So yeah, time to gather up loose ends, finish out things you've been doing for the last 4 weeks, if that's where you are, if that context is appropriate. And it is a Cancer moon. So usually we're able to help resource ourselves, take care of our needs, check in with our needs a little bit more easily with a Cancer moon. Yeah, not in any kind of rough aspect with either of the more intense planets, Saturn, Mars. And so I expect August to open up somewhat chill. Mercury is stationing pretty much around this time as well. So not that there won't be some complexity, but it seems to open up pretty chill. So August 1st, 2nd, 3rd. And then we get to the 3rd and the 4th. And then the 4th of August, there's a lot of action. So we're going to get Mercury stationing And that is going to happen at exactly 11:56 p.m. in my time zone in Central Time. So really effectively for most of the world, August 5th is going to be when Mercury is stationing, but that's really getting into the details of it as is appropriate for Virgo. However, the most important thing is just knowing that pretty much this whole first week of August, Mercury is slowing down. So when Mercury slows down, Mercury is our planet of communication, exchange, sometimes travel, uh, commerce, buying and selling, planning, thinking. Mercury, it's all of our rational, logistical stuff. That also might slow down. So information might slow down. Your internet could. Sometimes it does. Sometimes my faxes, when I used to be in pharmacy, my faxes, I would have to resend them. So, that kind of classic redoing, reviewing of Mercury things, that's on the table and just slowing down because literally the speed of the planet kind of 1-to-1 with down here. So how fast is that planet going up there? And how effective are those planets' archetypes or how smoothly are those archetypes running down here? So when Mercury is fast, information gets faster. When Mercury is slower, information comes slower. So if you're waiting for news, if you're trying to plan something, give it a bit more time. Might take a little bit more time. And then we know that Mercury is about to go into this whole, pretty much all of August retrograde journey where they're going to get reborn and we're going to get a big reset button on all of our Mercury things. So that we'll talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, the month starts off a bit quieter or slower, in my opinion. And then we're going to get this new moon. So yeah, it's very interesting to me. It's like we're starting this 4-week like Mercury retrograde from August 4th to August 28th. And that really lines up very, very well with the lunation cycle this month as well. So this 4-week moon going around. So it really feels like if things are kind of coming up in your life in certain areas of it, particularly like the Leo Virgo places, Mercury ruled places, and the life topics in those houses. So look there, most particularly. Um, but yeah, it's like there's some kind of story or something that really is contained in August, like August itself. Because by the time we get into September, we're already getting out of that. We're done with the retrograde and we're wrapping up that post-retrograde phase. So yeah, like August should be pretty interesting. There's going to be some tinkering with things most likely in, a constructive way when Mercury is retrograde. And the dates on that. So the Mercury stuff, the Mercury journey, on the 4th, we get the station. On the 18th of August, we get Mercury joining the sun. And that is the rebirth on August 18th. So we'll get there. And then August 28th, Mercury stationing direct. And then September 11th, the post retrograde phase is then over. And they're done going over all of the degrees that they've already traveled on. So essentially what I'm discussing here, if we want to look at Mercury, I'll animate it. But yeah, or actually let me go back. So they station at 4 degrees of Virgo. They station direct at 21 of Leo. And then once they get back there, they have to retrace all of their steps. They got to go through all those same degrees again up until that 4-degree mark in Virgo where they, like on the 4th, when they in the first part of the cycle stationed. Once they retrace all those steps and they get back to exactly where it started, then the post retrograde phase is over. So I really think most of these stories will have concluded by the end of August, but if they trickle into September a little bit, that would make sense. But yeah, just to kind of allowing for those Virgo processes in your life to be fiddled with. You can reorganize them, rethink things, renegotiate terms. And all of that is very natural and normal parts of growth. The processes that you put in place at one point in time usually need some upgrading at some point. So I think Mercury retrogrades are a really good time to do that stuff, to go back to the drawing board or optimize things or learn things, shore up knowledge. It's like every time I have a Mercury retrograde, pretty much I am going to learn something on my software that I should have already known in the past. It's like, oh, that cool button. So yeah, Mercury retrograde, in general, on more of the cautious side, over communicate this month in August. If you think that people understood you or know, the address that you gave them, or, maybe they lost the address, just double check, make sure everyone's on the same page. Don't jump to conclusions as much as possible. That's good advice all the time, but especially during a Mercury retrograde. If you are waiting for news or waiting for something to come about, I have more hope for that at the end of the month, and more in September. But with Mercury becoming invisible, it's like it might not be obvious how things are looking with the Virgo Gemini areas of our lives. It might not be apparent how that's going to all shake out till the end of August. So hang in there if you're waiting to see how news is going to come out, how things are going to shake out. Just let that process kind of be open-ended, or let things be open-ended pretty much all of August. Most of, or a good chunk of this retrograde, Mercury is in their own sign of Virgo, which gives them a lot of resourcing and help. It's like when you decide that you want to redo your website and you use the tools that you like to do that. It's not like a boss is forcing you to do it, or like asking you to do something, or not have resources while you do it. But when Mercury is in Virgo, it's like it has all the things that it needs to tinker away and over communicate and have a lot of success or avoid troubles, through that. Yeah, so I'm not, it seems like a very constructive type of retrograde. It's not like Mercury in Pisces with Neptune. Like, it's not like there are certain, levels of retrogrades in terms of like, whoa, how wild is this one going to be? And this one feels like, yeah, we're in Earth. We're in a practical Earth sign. In any event, Mercury retrograde, it's happening this month. On the 4th, that's when that begins. On the 4th, we also have a new moon in Leo. At 12 degrees of Leo, it's right in the middle of the sign. We've got Venus here as well, looking over it. And we've got Jupiter that can also see this new moon. Mars is sending a really invigorating sextile. So Jupiter is optimism. We got motivation, just being plugged right into this new moon. And so it's like there's an excitement to begin something here, maybe in kind of inspired tone to whatever we might be launching off or focusing on for the month of August. And the sun being in Leo, just like I was talking about Mercury and Virgo, resourcing. They have the tools that they need to do their job. And so it just seems very constructive. Some lunations, some new moons, full moons, they're not my favorite for like trying to imbue that astrological weather in like a magical way into things. A lot of people use like terms like manifesting, but like if you're into astrological magic and like elections and stuff, like pretty much all kind of, I feel like it's under a similar umbrella. This moon actually feels pretty good for those things. It feels pretty like solid, stable. Anytime like a fixed sign is involved, there's a potential for what is begun in that fixed sign to really last. So it's like having a stability with whatever is started when we have a new moon in a fixed sign like Leo. So yeah, do all your manifesty things. Have fun. Knowing that Mercury is going to be retrograde and then eventually moving back into Leo and having a conversation with Venus and all of these planets. It's like, yeah, there's like something of the will, like Leo. What is important for me? What is centered on my needs, my experience? And how do I move forward from that lens of myself? I'm not doing this for someone else. I'm not doing this because I want to look good. I'm not doing this because someone else wants me to do it. It's like with Leo and the sun, it's like you're doing it because you want to do it. It's something that your heart is on fire about, And so if that is where things feel like they're coming from, at the beginning of August, that's great. That's a green flag, like really expressing the self, maybe recommitting to yourself, recommitting to your own authenticity, recommitting to expressing yourself as yourself. All of that would be very, very fruitful things to do, I think, with this new moon Mercury retrograde. It's like coming back to the self, remembering the self with Leo sun. So I'm digging this new moon in Leo. Uh, yeah, Saturn's not seeing it, but it isn't a Saturn decan. Or sorry, a Saturn bound, I thought. Let me get my complicated wheel up here. This is in Jupiter's decan. Saturn's bound. So this is a little bit more into the weeds, but this is giving more flavor to what this lunation could be. So this new moon, being in a place of Jupiter, it's definitely more optimistic. We're just locked even better in with that optimism, that kind of vibe of expansion and, at the very least, stabilization. So hopefully there's something here, at the very least, some stabilizing energy coming back to the self in a way that is grounding or coming back to homeostasis. But Saturn is here as a bound lord, even though Saturn can't really see this lunation. But maybe a hint of structure, order. Both Jupiter, Sun are order, and then structure, or sorry, like Saturn's like the edges, like the outside, the parameter of it. So I feel like, wow, it's Sun, Jupiter, Saturn. It's all of these diurnal planets of order and structure and bounds and edges. And so it's like really like making whatever you might want to begin this first week of August. It feels just very like you could root in with it and have it be like, it's very constructive. A little bit more serious of a tone, because usually we think about like, Leo is play. A lot of the modern contemporary work around Leo feels like it gets very playful. And I think it can absolutely be like that. But this does feel a little bit more serious, I guess, than just outright playful expression Leo. So let me see if I had any other thoughts on that new moon. Oh yeah, the last aspect is the sextile with Mars, and the next aspect is the sextile with Jupiter. So I like that too for this new moon. It's like so pumped up by these two planets up here. So it's like the moon's last thing it's going to do is have a conversation with Mars, a sextile. So it's like uh, that energy, that motivation is coming to the moon in a helpful way. It's like saying, yeah, here's some energy, here's some motivation to do that thing you want to do. And then Jupiter is here being like, yeah, and I believe in you. And it can work. So I love both of these two here. It's just feels very pumped up. A little serious, a little structure, a little order, like vibrant. Okay. Yeah, so look to the Leo and Virgo house topics. So this is the last thing I'll say about the new moon. So if you're looking at your chart, like so for this theoretical Leo rising, this would be in their first house of self and general circumstances, mind, body, spirit. The second house is more resourcing, money, needs. So for Leo rising, it's about you, it's about your stuff and things, your needs being met, etc. First house, second house. Now, if I am looking at, maybe a Gemini rising is going to experience this more in their third and their fourth house. Maybe this new moon, you're going to be launching off on something that you're on fire to do over the next month, having to do with your neighborhood, your community, your local space, communication, writing, any kind of ritual stuff you do in your life, familiar people, places, things, all of the third house stuff. If you're like going to launch off on learning a new thing, like foundational learning. And fourth house, private life, home, dwelling, land, ancestry, intergenerational themes, parents. So yeah, like there are ways that we can get more specific about what that new moon is going to be for you, what this Mercury retrograde is going to be for you. It's really affecting Virgo, Leo. And then we can't leave out, again, just quickly going back to like Mercury's retrograde story. Mercury is going to have their rebirth this month in August. And that also does affect Gemini. A rebirth for Gemini So then, looking at that in a chart, if I've got, uh, we'll go back to that Leo rising example, that rebirth of Mercury this month will reset or be a chance to kind of regroup and go on in a new direction, maybe with money, needs, resourcing, as well as friends, groups, networks, or hopes, dreams, aspirations. If it is, let's say, a Sagittarius rising, now there could be a refresh, a restart, a renewal in career, life path, and partnerships. So yeah, there are ways to hone in on this stuff. So find out. And if you don't know your rising sign, you can look at astroseek.com, channynicholas.com, astro.com. They all have chart generators that you can type in your birth data, and it can help you find that rising sign. So you can start to say, okay, what's the bucket of life topics in this house? That's where I'm going to look for these things and notice when they come up. And then, when you notice those things coming up, it's like, yay, astrology, fun, neat. So yeah. Okay. Let's see. New moon, stationing Mercury. And then the 5th. Now this is where, okay, this first week, also some things that are coming into focus, becoming more vivid. We've got these Gemini planets that are moving into a square with Saturn and Pisces. So this is the other big signature for the month. There's kind of 3 big signatures I have for the month of August. One of them's the Mercury stuff. The other one, I just love this Leo new moon being tied in with where Mercury will be. So this Leo lunation cycle. So I guess also the Aquarius full moon. I'm going to be watching that more than most full moons. And then the Saturn and Jupiter square and Saturn Mars square. I think that's the other big thing. Now, August starts off a little slower, quieter, I think, building into the next lunation cycle. By mid-month, we're going to really feel this square, and what will we potentially notice with that. So under this archetypal thing of all the spectrum of difficult, more neutral, more maybe favorable things, it can kind of be any of them. It's going to depend on other layers of timing that are going on in your life. It's going to depend on a lot of things, if you're a day chart or a night chart. But I did write down some potential themes for the Saturn Jupiter square. So just because a set of themes is coming, it doesn't necessarily mean you will feel a certain way, or a certain thing will happen externally. But like words like potential, or there's maybe the probability of certain types of things coming up increases, which I know is kind of a wordy way to say it. But if that's the nuance that I need to say it, in a way that's going to keep us more open and curious, versus being like, oh, Saturn's going to say no to my growth, womp womp. It's like, I don't know, you might run into some growing pains. There might be some difficulties with growth versus limitation, trying to be free versus restriction, freedom versus discipline, freedom and discipline working together. I mean, these themes that might seem different a lot of times can work together really well. And when we have a square is actually an opportunity, I think, to bring themes together in a way where they might not want to otherwise, but can we make the adjustments or the pivots to either just be with what is while it's there, or to even put things together a little bit more constructively. So might we experience like Mars wanting to go and Saturn being slow, so difference in pacing. How do we roll with that? How do we navigate difficult pacing? Like, I wish we could go faster, or this is slowing down. Maybe that's, I like that, but I can tell this other person doesn't like that something's slowing down or something. So it's like, yeah, these things might be around you. They could be inside, they could be outside, but we are getting themes of these Gemini planets being very excited, very enthusiastic, motivated, having tons of inspiration, ideas, wanting to go and explore and do things, have fun. But then Saturn bringing in some kind of limit, or just potentially needing to have healthy, good boundaries and say, yes, Jupiter, yes, we can say yes, Jupiter. Mars, yes, we can go. But, and also Saturn might have something to say that is a bit more serious, realistic, um, but could be constrictive or limiting in some cases. And this is where we have to try really hard not to put good and bad on everything. We don't know if it's going to be good or bad. Usually we'll think, oh, slowdowns must be bad. They're not always bad. A lot of us think that, when things are moving forward and there's progress, that is quote unquote good, or innovation is always good. It's not. And progress is not always good. It's not. So, good, bad, I don't know. But there are themes of growth, expansion, limitation, constriction. There are themes of progress and saying yes, and themes of saying no. And they're kind of button up against each other in a way where we might need to make some adjustments and pivot. So if as we get to the middle of August, if you're having to put in extra effort, if you're like, why is everything requiring more effort? Or why is this going slower? That might not mean that you're on the wrong path. It might be just fine, but just know that like August, and then we got the Mercury retrograde. So I don't think things are maybe straightforward. There's a higher probability that there's going to be some complexity, some windingness, some kind of going back and forth a bit, and then having to deal with differences in pacing and, the order of operations. I would like to do things in this order, or I would like to do things here and then there and at this time. And, it's just having to navigate some obstacles along the way, potentially. So that's one of the biggest signatures, I think. And just to give you a little bit more specifics on that, if we look at the days, on the 19th is when the Jupiter Saturn square is going to go archetype and be perfect, be 18 degrees of Gemini. And that happens on August 19th. So we're building into this slowly. And what's more is it's a double application, which just means it's stronger. It's even just like a louder type of tone because Saturn's moving backwards, Jupiter's moving forwards. It's like two cars kind of running into each other when they're both going, when one of them's retrograde, one of them's direct. So as we get into mid-August, this is all just building up. So then also what that means, I mean, if we want to look at Mars too, Mars actually on the 15th, Mars is going to meet Saturn. So yeah, mid-August, maybe kind of grindy in some ways, but just keep moving forward because then, or take a break because after August 15th, August 19th, Jupiter, Mars are going to get past Saturn. And then things might start to feel a little less constricted, a little bit more open and free and easy breezy. Second half of August, we still are going to have Mercury retrograde though. So even after Mars and Jupiter get past this kind of slowing down influence and like the graininess might start to let up in our own lives, there might still be some outstanding issues or projects that need wrapping up yet with the Mercury retrograde. And then by the 28th, we've got Mercury stationing direct. And by then, I mean, Jupiter's already 2 degrees away from Saturn. Saturn is still moving further away. Yeah. So by the time we get into September, a lot of that square will be alleviated. And I think we're going to feel more free and able to. I was just watching the Olympics. I was watching those horses do the cross country horse thing. And it's like when you got a long path and you can just really open it up and go fast. That might be more the end of August, but hang in there, Okay, let me check on the chat and see how people are doing. All right, looks like everyone's doing just dandy. Yeah, thank you, Kai. Kai is trying to quell my practitioner fears. They are also a practitioner, so they know all of this stuff. But yeah, people are responsible for their own use of this information. Yeah, and I just don't want to contribute to mental tension. Like that's, and maybe that's another thing I should say too, is that's a good way to tell, like, how do I tell if I'm, looking at this void for too long? How do I know if I'm using astrology and it's just making me more anxious? If you feel more tense, if there's more mental tension, if you know that something's coming and you continually are checking the clock to see, like, is the moon with Chiron yet? Is the moon with Chiron yet? So is there mental tension? Is there tension? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to avoid. All right. All righty. So let's see what's coming up then. Uh, oh, last thing too, with that square. So similarly, so when we got to try to get a little bit more specific about these growing pains, or having to adjust or navigate our yeses around our boundaries, or navigate the expansion and growth around obstacles, delays, challenges. If you want to look at where this might come up more in your life, look at the house topics that Pisces and Gemini describe. So for this Capricorn rising, this would be their third house and their sixth house. Maybe the sixth and the sixth, this is just an example. Maybe they would like to get another cat. However, in their regular environment, in their usual spaces, there is just not space for another litter box. We just don't have the room for this to be comfortable. That's one way that could come out, but it can be more specific. So look, if you're Capricorn rising, sixth house topics, third house topics, the third house things are where the limitations, constrictions, delays, whatever's are going to come from. The sixth house is where we might be wanting to find some stabilization or even expand or grow. And then if it's, let's see, let's try another one. If you're a Pisces rising, now we're getting to deal with your fourth house of home, family, dwelling, ancestry, land, private life, and yourself. Maybe it's that you would love to find a bunch of family recipes to make, learn your mom's meatballs, but maybe you're tired and you feel like you need a nap. That's just one possibility. You have a lot of responsibility from work, or you're, having some kind of, you're focused on other things for yourself, and it's kind of difficult, even though you want to do these other things or you want to rearrange your furniture, but maybe you stubbed your toe and you're like, well, I'm not going to be rearranging my furniture mid-August. I guess I'll just have to wait. So yeah, there can be a little bit of a different kind of adjustment, but with topics of self and origin. Maybe there's a restructuring of the self, maybe kind of figuring out your new edges, new borders and boundaries. And maybe that comes from having learned something about your past or your origins or ancestry. I can imagine learning, like, oh, I've got a bunch of ancestral, like intergenerational anxiety things in my family. And maybe now that I know that, I am going to honor myself and be like, yeah, I don't want to do that thing that makes me anxious. I don't want to, visit that aunt or whatever. Like, so there's a lot of things that this could be that might be super constructive. But anytime there's a square, it requires some kind of change, transformation, adjustment, pivot, some kind of crunchiness, and sometimes, like Mars being the nature of a square, Mars conflict. But sometimes that is like the healthy internal conflict that we have to do to get to kind of wrestle with ideas to get to a point with them where it feels aligned or understood. Uh, but yeah, that's all I have to say about that square. Mm. And again, like that, this really starts to, I think, heat up or get louder, really like starting the 5th of August. Because by the time we're at the 5th of August, well, wrong way. We've got engagement, which is a specific thingy where when a planet is applying to another planet within 3 degrees, that is really within like striking range where like we're going to be where these planets can really feel each other. These planets can really interact with each other. And we then have that more vividly down here. So engagement begins on the 5th, completes on the 19th of August, and then starts to separate out. So yeah, there's some processes. Oh, it just feels so constructive and juicy this month. Kind of getting our hands dirty maybe a little bit in restructuring and ordering things. Yeah, a lot of good work that we can do in tying up loose ends, shoring things up, getting into the necessary details of things, working around challenges. Not probably going to be a straight line. Is it ever? I mean, sometimes it is, not usually. Uh, yeah, lots of care and attention to the Leo and Virgo places this month, and Gemini places. Now, the 6th and the 7th. Now, this is a cute, fun, nice thing. Here's my cute, fun, nice things for the month. So we got a Sun Jupiter sextile that is active at the beginning and middle of August. This is just feeling that lighter energy of Jupiter, feeling more hopeful, optimistic, maybe having an easier time with understanding or learning, and really bringing order. Like Jupiter really brings order to things, and the Sun does as well. And so, uh, if looking at the Leo and Gemini parts of the chart in this case, great time to try to put order to Gemini Leo things. So for the Scorpio rising, this would be their 10th and their 8th. I'm not going to get into it. If you know, you know. Uh, this was my other cute, fun, nice thing. Venus and Mercury, they're going to be together as well. So on the 4th, Venus went into Virgo. So that'll be a good segue. Let's talk about her there. But I love Venus and Mercury together because it's really just this artistic, creative jackpot of a combination. So August, well, if you are resorting or working through things, maybe it's to make them prettier. Maybe it's to make, I can imagine like rearranging the furniture because you learned feng shui. And it's just like, you're going to make a bunch of improvements that are going to make things feel more enjoyable, more pleasurable. That's what Venus really does sometimes, especially when she's got this eye for detail. A lot of creative, artistic, and like I'm always like looking at professional chefs' charts. A lot of Virgo activity with those people, high crafts people with Virgo. So if you are an artist, a musician, a creative person, if you want help with creative expression, sometimes Virgo can be we can get a little too tied up with the details, but I think with Venus here, it can help loosen things up a little bit where it can help us express in a little bit more of an open way. And then I usually wouldn't go that direction, but I'm kind of saying that because we have a Leo sun right here as well. So if it was like, if the sun, once the sun gets into Virgo, I think we can start to run into like, yes, a crafts person, but at, to the nth degree to where they're never releasing their work because they have perfectionist tendencies or something like that. That's like pure Virgo. But right now we've got this really expressive, fun Leo sun getting a sextile from Jupiter Mars. So it's like we get all this artistic, creative potential and the potential to fire it off and share it. Right. So I don't know. I love Venus and Venus and Mercury coming together. If you are a creative person, August might be a really great month, especially to like we have these like retrograde things happening and some square action, having to navigate and pivot and adjust that, Jupiter Saturn situation. I think Venus, Mercury help us to be more creative with solutions this month. They help us to use whatever is being changed as an opportunity to make it even better. And so the one thing to know though, so now getting into some of the technical tidbits with Venus moving into Virgo, they are no longer in Leo with the sun. But either way, Venus is still going to be with the planet who rules the sign. So there'll still be some of that assistance as they keep moving along here. They're going to keep getting farther from the sun. No, they're not. Scratch that. We're on a long downhill journey, I believe, with Venus meeting the sun, but that's not months from now. But anyway, I think the main point here is whether Venus is in Leo or Virgo right now in the first week of August, they've got dispositorship. They're going to be well resourced. Venus theoretically is not at their happiest in Virgo, and they're very different places. Venus is said to be in their fall here in Virgo. And one way I like to think about that is the incongruence with how Venus would like to do things, but how they're made to do things in Virgo. So I was just giving a lot of constructive examples of Venus and Mercury in Virgo. We've got craftspeople, artists, process-oriented folks who really have an attention for detail. And that's really awesome. Venus themselves is a little bit more free, easy breezy, I think. When we think about like earthy Venus over here in Taurus, it's like growing a garden and planting the seeds and then tending to it and showing up consistently and kind of being open-ended about how things grow and supporting it as it grows. Versus, Virgo energy is a little bit more tight. It's compartmentalized. It's separating of things into the right places. It's, having things just perfect and just so. And Venus has a little bit more humanity than that. So it's kind of hard to squeeze her into a box here. But it's like if you give Venus a spreadsheet, they're going to make it pretty, probably. And we have that at our disposal for August. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then I did forget to mention as well. So when Mercury moves into Virgo, they're going to lose, or when they're in Virgo, they have their chariot. When they move back into Leo, they're going to lose that. So August 15th, when Mercury moves back into Leo, Mercury's skills are going to be a little bit less. Their efficacy is going to be a little bit less. So, if you've got logistical things to do, the earlier in the month you can get them done, the better, I think. If it's like stuff you know how to do, like it's not a new thing that you have to learn. It's like, I know I have to send invoices. I would rather have Mercury in Virgo. And even though the sun is pretty close and they're under the beams, they have their little sunbrella, so they're not as harmed by it. But once we get August 15th and beyond, then Mercury is no longer in their chariot. They're right under the beams of the sun. And that's a little tougher for them. And then they're also going to be super hidden. So it's like news and information and exchange of anything. Might be a little bit more difficult the second half of August. And then we also, after Mercury leaves Virgo, Venus is no longer supported as well by them. So it's almost like as the month progresses, we see this winding complexity coming up again. Yeah, it's a straighter line earlier in the month with logistical things. All right. But yeah, I wanted to talk about that cool artistry, cool like Venus Mercury conjunction first week moving into the second week of August. And then if I go back to following the moon, so we had our new moon in Leo, and then we're going to have a Virgo moon for a few days, which, I mean, right now when the moon is in Virgo and Sag, it's getting aspects from a lot of planets. So I imagine the 6th, the 7th, into the 8th, moon is getting a lot of things from other planets, more busy, more meaningful, more remarkable type of days potentially. And then August 8th, 9th, 10th, we're going to have a Libra moon. And it seems a little quieter than our last Libra moon. We're getting a trine of this really expressive, motivating, inspired energy. So it might be a little bit more, with the moon picking up light. I think the 8th, 9th, 10th might be a little bit more lively, a little bit more, feels more bouncy and light and vibrant than and externalizing that on the 8th, 9th, 10th more than the previous few days. So there's that. And then the sun moving away from that sextile with Jupiter, but still definitely there. And then the next thing of interest is really that square. Jupiter, Saturn square, Mars, Saturn square. And last thing I want to discuss today before I let us all go is the moon in Sagittarius, more the 13th, 14th, 15th of August is another one of those sets of days where moon is getting a lot of aspects from other planets. So vigorous, vibrant, more meaningful, remarkable, busy types of days. August 13th, 14th, 15th could be very constructive, could be kind of a mind your own business day on the 14th. I'm looking at this Moon Mars opposition here. But Jupiter and Venus look upon all of this as well. So, if there are relational components, like pick your battles. This is a pick your battles day on the 14th. Don't, if someone's being wild or, dramatic or whatever it is, just let them from afar and know that the moon is going to be in a different sign in a couple days. But it also might be a day where we're working through a lot of things happening, quieting down then more on the 16th. Let's see. Yeah, but this fire stuff on the 14th, 15th was pretty interesting. So we get Mercury moving back into Leo. And that is on, that's on the 14th of August. So Mercury moves back into Leo. And then what I saw pop up there is this fire trine that we'll be having on the 14th between the moon, Chiron, and the sun, Mercury. So this here, we've got Aries, Sagittarius, and Leo, moon, Chiron, sun, Mercury. On the 14th, this looks like it could be like very expressive, working through cathartic expression, any healing kind of expressiveness, conversations that could be really difficult, but healing, expressing the self, expressing the needs, expressing the whatever it is about you that needs to be expressed, but something about it being chironic and being, potentially not the most fun, but also potentially very cathartic or healing or, something like that. So on the 14th, if there's tender topics, on the 13th, let's just say the 13th too, August 13th, 14th, we might need to be kind of gentle, tender with ourselves, gentle, tender with other people. Because yeah, the moon's kind of it's plugging in all this, and fire is just so it doesn't just sit and not do anything about stuff. It doesn't just sit and not say stuff. It does stuff and it says stuff. Fire is active. It's action. It's spiritual. Fire is like it's one of the higher elements, that it goes upward. It doesn't go downward like water and earth. So that is what is really being brushed up on the 13th and the 14th. And Mercury retrograde. Maybe it's a conversation that you've already had and you're having it again. Maybe it is a topic that is not new. And again, if you want to look exactly where this might be affecting you, look to the house topics of all the fire signs for your chart. So let's see. That was interesting. Yeah, and I guess if we want to be really specific here, I would say like the morning of the 15th for the global West, more like universal time. This is going to be your afternoon on the 15th, this tenderoni time. And then the evening of August 15th, more globally East time zones you get. So, plan accordingly. I think that was kind of the last little thing. And this is getting a little beyond the 2 weeks that I want to cover, but I think it's good to tie it in. So Mercury is going to make that switch on the 14th of August back into Leo. Venus loses their dispositor. Mercury loses their chariot. So now our communication stuff might be a little bit more funky or complex, having to work through some challenges there. So just be, if any information is missing, hang in there. And then we've got Jupiter and Mars. They're also, now they're not quite as well resourced either. But um, what did I want to say? Is that pretty much it? Yeah, I think that was pretty much it. Just knowing like Mercury's dignity is really going to change on the 15th. And then the moon is really going to plug into it. Oh, yeah. And then the Cazimi. So then on the 18th, we get a little bit of a respite from Mercury being under the rays and having a harder time with communication or those matters. But there's a bit of a respite, and that is going to be at 8:58 p.m. Central Time. So I'm going to be talking to you all again before the 18th, but just in case I don't talk to you before then, the 18th of August is going to uh, hopefully provide some clarity around any kind of matters that are outstanding or need attention. We might have some insight, clarity, um, information coming in on the 18th. It's when Mercury is right in the heart of the sun. And it's like Mercury is being given a megaphone. And the sun is like, what would you like to say? What would you like us to know? And so, if you have thoughts that seem really helpful or like, oh, I didn't realize it or I didn't see it that way, any kind of insight coming in around the 18th, take that, take that seriously, honor it, write it down, remember it. And maybe as the next 2 weeks move along and we get this Mercury retrograde cycle wrapping up, that insight from the 18th will come to pass or could help us out in navigating whatever the Mercury retrograde is. And then being this is the Mercury retrograde version of this conjunction, because sometimes Mercury and the sun meet when Mercury is moving forward. Here, Mercury and the sun are meeting and Mercury's moving backward. This we can conceptualize symbolically as the rebirth or the beginning of Mercury's cycle with the sun. So then Virgo and Gemini places and the house topics of those places will also be reborn. And you get a nice reset button. So again, this Pisces rising, mid-August, a rebirth for partnership or home, family, parents, dwelling, ancestry stuff. Maybe it even ties in with your health or your daily routines or pets or something like that. So insights, renewals, rebirths, reset buttons, all of that kind of going on in the Virgo Gemini places. And that's going to be mid-August, especially the 18th. So those are the big things I wanted to let you know about. I don't know, this seems like a very potentially fruitful month, but not in like a straightforward way. So as long as we're kind of open to that, patient with that, I think we'll be seeing September with some clearer eyes than we have right now. Let me see if there's any questions, any transits that I didn't go over that you would like to see, because I definitely didn't cover everything. Yeah, Ben is saying that 3-degree orb of engagement is so accurate. I mean, it is. It is no wonder to me that like Hellenistic astrologers specifically lay that out and be like, this is when we're noticing things. Because yeah, I noticed it too. It's pretty right on every time. Yes. Okay. Oh, and Michael asked, does being under the beams affect Mercury much when it's in Virgo? I imagine once it backtracks into Leo, definitely, but until that point, will that be impacting much? Your brain is in the right place. Like Mercury definitely is better off in Virgo when it comes to being under the beams. So anytime a planet gets within 15 degrees of the sun, it's kind of a mathematical convention, but the idea behind it is that a planet loses visibility. And so, ideally, a planet would be visible, that would mean that that planet is doing their work and we can see it. We can see what they're making. It's like a musician and they're actually able to give me their music. Um, so Mercury in Virgo, now here, they're still under the beams. They're still within 15 degrees of the sun, but they have this loophole where being Mercury is in their own sign, they get what is called their chariot, which is like having a sunbrella. And so the sun beams of the sun aren't so harsh. And so the efficacy, I think that piece of effectiveness of Mercury doing their work is protected. It's like they can now focus on, writing their music because the sun isn't beating down on them as hard. At the same time, um, we can't see them and they're still going to be invisible once they get within that 15 degrees. And now so that'll be, invisible, but in Virgo, but still so close to the sun that we can't see them in the morning or the evening before or after sunrise. Um, then that symbolism, I would imagine, would still come through. So, all right, Mercury in Virgo with its chariot, able to write its music, but it's still hidden and we can't see it. So it's like they have not released the music yet. I can't see it. Where is it? It's like they sent me their mixtape in the mail and I don't have it. So yeah, I do think like the efficacy, uh, it can be fine under the beams when you have your chariot. But that visibility piece, we can still interpret things as being hidden or less apparent. And that might cause some struggles, but it really depends on the context. Like I always say, if you're like a secret agent person, that might be perfect. If you're trying to plan a surprise birthday party, yeah, that's actually very favorable to not be seen. Some people really like that's their jam. So it really depends on the life of the person. But yeah, so kind of two questions: efficacy, visibility, apparentness. That's kind of two separate questions with that. But thank you for bringing that up because that is how we get into the nuance of like, well, okay, if I've got this chunk of days, like say, I've got to do a thing between August 8th, 9th through the, 13th or something, which days are better? Theoretically, I'm going to say when Mercury is in Virgo. So, final answer. Any other questions? Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to my spirited comments today. Yeah, I'm gonna, it'll smooth out. I'll figure out a good new kind of process for myself. That's what my Mercury retrograde is going to be about, by the way. If you haven't already figured it out, this is it. We're in the pre-retrograde phase. Yeah, reformatting my processing of how I do these things to ground it a little bit more. I don't know. We'll see. We're going to be open-ended about it. We'll see where this takes us, but all in the name of hopefully helping astrology be used in a way that is healthy and not unhealthy. I feel like a knife salesman sometimes. It's like, yeah, knives are great. They're very sharp blades. I can sell them to people and be like, now you too can saw through an aluminum can if you want to. But it's like, I don't want to just be hawking knives around on the internet without putting it in a nice like sheath or something, or put a scabbard around that so no one gets cut, or like not giving people any kind of training like, hey dudes, this is how you use a knife, this is how you hold it so you don't hurt yourself, because there are ways of holding knives that are better and not better. Yeah. Mm. Any other announcements? Do I have any other things? Oh yeah, I gotta sell my own stuff. I have a Jupiter square Saturn workshop that you can find below. I'm also going to put it in the chat because, why not? Um, it's relevant this month. It's extra relevant. The Jupiter Saturn square. So I did a workshop on Jupiter going into Gemini. And I really focused it, and it's not just Jupiter and Gemini. It is the fact that we're having a Jupiter in Gemini that's getting this overcoming square from Saturn, which is a big signature for this year into mid 2025. So if you're curious about how it's going to affect you, how it could affect you, and then just learning all of the underlying work of making these interpretations of Jupiter Saturn square, all of that's in the workshop. There's a kind of a one-stop shop for that configuration. And then there's rising sign templates at the end of that content to help you work out what it will be based on rising sign. So check out that workshop. It's $15, which is like, I should charge more. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Not to like make scarcity a thing, but $15 is a pretty good deal because I spent like 2 months on it and it's like 4 hours of content and a whole PowerPoint. So yeah, definitely worth the money. I have that below. You can book an appointment. I have a sliding scale if finances are difficult or if you meet my criteria, which is all on my frequently asked questions on my website. But I do have a sliding scale if astrology is like, well, that's way too expensive. I am never going to be able to afford a reading. I like to help people out in those instances because I don't want money to get in the way of astrology. So definitely send me an email if that interests you, or if that's a need. That is my email address is aligninglight@gmail.com. I didn't do any of the enclosures. The enclosure calculator is below. Oops, I spaced that. Yeah, I think that's it. I think those are the main things. Newsletter sign up. I got the discounts. I always have a 10% running discount in conjunction with Chris Brennan's referral list. You can use Astrology Podcast to get 10% off of any of my services. And right now I'm also running a forecasting discount code in my midlife crisis of forecasting, which actually I feel a lot better about doing forecasting individually to tailor it to your chart. You can get a reading for that too. And there's a discount code running right now. Did I already forget it? Oh my gosh, am I like blanking on it? Oh, it wasn't solstice. That was last month. Hold on a sec. I'm going to look it up. Oh my gosh, how embarrassing. But it's a good one. Thankfully, I send myself weather. I send myself my own newsletter. I just had to look up my newsletter. For the month of August, you get 15% off using the code weather, WEATHER. And that is good through till September 1st. So there is some discounts. There's a newsletter. There's readings. There's so much stuff. Oh, and I have my resources as well. I have a bunch of resources on my website for astrology students, my favorites for astrology learning. I have a free beginner's guide that's really great. It's like 20 pages. It's got a bunch of cool tables that can be kind of quick reference for symbolism for astrology. I have that on my website, www.aligninglightastrology.com. And if you're really into astrology and you are starting to do readings, I do have my chart workup template also on my resources. That kind of walks through. I basically have a list of all of the stuff that I could look at if I wanted to. So yeah, all that is up there. I want to just make it known. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. I very much appreciate it. Hopefully the next couple weeks go very well for you. And, let's just be open to Mercury's retrograde, bringing on whatever information from, from the past we needed to know, bringing more clarity, more communication, and then hopefully we'll be running into September totally unencumbered with all of this. All right, my friends, have a good couple weeks. Hit the like button if you like